Welcome to Dominate Your Day podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders who want to make a difference in the workplace. We believe each person is unique and has a purpose they can live out every day and make an impact in the world. Here at Dominate Your Day podcast, we hear stories from leaders who have used their unique talents to transform themselves and their companies from the inside out.
Well, I'm excited today to welcome Aaron Trahan. Welcome to Dominate Your Day show, Aaron.
Hi, Dana. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, I love hearing stories of entrepreneurs, and particularly yours. You're kind of fresh in, 2 years in as an entrepreneur here in Texas, which I'm excited. I'm in Dallas and you're in Austin. So right now, what I'm learning about you is you're doing some really cool work around mindset and as a leadership performance coach. This is something I've seen so much in the workplace right now. And I'm curious how you built your business, or you're building your business about this, and why working around mindset and performance mindset. Tell us about that.
Yeah, such a great place to start. And, I'm a big believer that our thoughts, which then convert into beliefs, and then beliefs drive emotions, ultimately end up showing up in our behaviors and our results. And so mindset is such a critical component to that. And I always go back to the timeless wisdom of Henry Ford with his quote from way back when that says, whether you think you can or think you can't, you will always be right. And I think with all the hustle and bustle of our everyday life and our busy schedules, I think we forget about that sometimes. I think it's very hard to keep that present and in the moment and top of mind, because it all starts with our beliefs and our thoughts that ultimately generate the discipline, the motivation, all the things that lead to the behavior that generates the results we desire. And so when I think about creating the framework around a performance mindset and how it may differ from some of the other more famous mindsets that have been, really brought to the mainstream media through the great work that Carol Dweck done, is really around the bias for action, right? And that there is still, even though thoughts and beliefs are so important, they can only take you so far if there's no action behind it. So I wanted to create something, quite frankly, that I wish I would have had way early on in my executive career that would have helped me understand, figure out, and create that strategic framework on the how to get to the next level. What does the next step look like? Who's holding me accountable? Why is this next step important? So really having that strategic framework that builds confidence to take action to get to where you want to go. I think so many people, because of the uncertainty and the questions around the how to get there, it ultimately breeds inaction. And then that's where the growth mindset kind of goes to die. And that's, you may think all the right things, but if you're not acting, you're not going to get where you want to go.
So interesting you're saying that. We talk a lot about the growth mindset here and Dominate Your Day. And one of the things, and just mindset in general, and one of the things is I've been on this journey of working with my clients and helping them with their mindset, is I'm seeing a lot of just blank stares when I say, your thoughts aren't true. Your thoughts are not true. You're like, well, what is mindset? So how do you get an executive, a leader who's so busy, just running their, running either their own business or leading an organization, that they're not even thinking about their mindset? How do you kind of stop and have a pause and create that space to talk about that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, especially with the type of people that we work with, it's a very fast pace, very hustle induced culture of just achieving, performing. In the first place that I like to start is creating more of a level setting moment and just coming to the agreement that more is not a strategy. Just achieving more is not a good strategy. If you're pursuing or chasing after something you don't really want or don't really need, you will never have enough. You will never get off the hamster wheel. You will never feel like you have the time or space or energy or attention or focus to prioritize mindset. So that's the first place I like to start is more is simply not a strategy. And so the opposite of that is knowing your why. What are you optimizing for? Why are you doing what you're doing? What is that ultimately going to show up for in terms of results that equate to happiness and success for you? Not for your external environment or anything else, but I think that's kind of the 1-2 punch there to try to get some presence and top of mind focus around why am I doing what I'm doing? And I think when we can do that, when the why is strong enough, you will always be able to figure out the how. When the why is murky or you can't really see it, grasp it, or understand it, how to get you from where you are to where you're going could be exceptionally difficult. And as a result of that, just more stuff becomes the strategy, which as we just discussed, is not really a strategy.
So, Aaron, let me ask you a question. Are you serving who you once were? So what happened? Tell us your story. What you found.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, this big, bold, strange, abstract word of leadership showed up at a very early age for me. I was thrown into a leadership position. I say thrown. It was earned, but there was also some battlefield promotions in there. And I wake up one day and I'm a 23-year-old kid thrown into a position running a fairly large business, $100 million on an annual run rate, growing 30% a year. And while I was able to have some success from there, it was very much right place, right time. I was succeeding not because of how great I was. I was succeeding in spite of some of my weaknesses and development areas. And while that will work for a while, and all the great things come with that. You're going to feel validated. Your ego is going to inflate. You're going to think you've got the golden touch. Anything you touch is going to turn to gold. It did lead me to a place where I was a member of the executive leadership team of a NASDAQ traded public company, overseeing now $1 billion of revenue and all before the age of 30. That's the highlight. But what sits underneath that I kind of like to tell all my clients is I'm confident I have made every single mistake there was to be made as a young emerging leader. And that was that big shift for me is me finding myself in a new place where I realized that my old game plan it's not going to work going forward. I've got to rebuild. I've got to recalibrate. I have to get back into a growth mode, leave the ego at the door. And as Marshall Goldsmith so brilliantly says in his book, what got me here is not going to get me there. And that's a tough pill to swallow. That's not an easy recalibration to do. Um, and so that's what led me to say, okay, I've become complacent. I have plateaued out. I know deep down I'm not operating as the best version of myself, and I'm leaving way too much potential on the sideline. I've got to get back to growth mode. I've got to get back to becoming my best version. So that was the pivot moment that set me down an entirely new course. Thank God for coaching because that was my first step. This was probably 8 or 9 years ago. I've been using a coach ever since then, but that was the mechanism for me that helped me shine some lights on some very blind spots that I had and really helped me refocus, helped me better examine the weaknesses that I had, and then set down this course to convert some of those weaknesses into a strength. The major one was around my ability to lead people. When you're thrown into a leadership position at 23, 24, you don't come out of college with a lot of training on how to lead people, how to lead teams, especially those teams that are almost twice your age and have twice your experience. This is, there's no books for that. Um, so for me, it was really dialing in to leave behind the focus on me and start to shift the focus on we. How can I elevate those around me? How can I develop my teams? How can I get everyone around me prepared for the next level and even the level above that? And it finally clicked after a decade in the workforce now that if I make everyone else around me better and get them to the next level, I will by default also rise to new level. Um, and I'll end with it's funny how passions jump up and bite you. You know, you hear all the advice from a lot of talking heads around just follow your passion or follow your interest. Well, sometimes you got to go through a little bit of fire to really understand what those passions are. And for me, it was all around working with high performance leaders and helping them go from their own version of good to great, helping them get to the next level. And that was kind of the gravitational pull that continued to pull me to launching my own firm last year.
So, how would you define when were coming through this and you were learning yourself and kind of being humble and saying, okay, I've got to be a different leader than I was before? And you worked on yourself, and then something you said bit you and said, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to help other leaders. How did you come up with performance mindset?
Yeah, you know, it's I always kind of view them as kind of one and the same. And I think for going back to my experience, what ultimately led me to discover new level after new level after new level of performance, the fuel for that was my mindset. And then when I also reverse engineer all of my stumbles, all of my setbacks, all of my failures, what led to them? Guess what was also front and center there? It was my mindset. You know, my ego and the validation of my track record and the promotions and the money that was rolling in. It's easy to start seeing doors in the quote unquote house start to get cracked open for complacency to slide in. And without me even knowing it, me thinking I was much greater than I actually was, I slipped from a growth mindset into a fixed mindset. And once I did, that's when the growth and leadership development really started to slow down and stop altogether. I had to recalibrate, get back to a growth mindset. And so, really, how I came up with performance mindset was I wanted to go beyond growth. Like, what is missing from the growth mindset? And it all came down to action. After seeing so many people say the right things, post all the right things, thinking and believing doesn't work without action being put behind it. And so that's where I kind of think performance mindset is that next level to a growth mindset, all focus on taking a bias for action.
And so, what does that look like when you're working with a client? And did you have somebody, you said you had a coach, you probably had a few leaders that were helpful to you, maybe not, I don't know. But what was it that helped you create this kind of blueprint?
Yeah, so a lot of it was going back to my experiences, and you know, I like to examine to see the leaders of who who are the leaders and what are the common threads, just like myself that found some early success, but then plateaued out, and all of a sudden seemed to have an interruption in their trajectory that was up and to the right, where it seems like other leaders continue to find new level after new level after new level. And so I then looked for what are the common threads here? What were my own quote unquote trap doors on the accelerator that I fell through? And so it really came down to five key areas. And anytime that I see an emerging leader or executive leader really lose their way or have that same slip into a fixed mindset that I had, it's always at least at a minimum one of these five areas that show up as a weakness. And the five areas, just to run through them real quick, it's almost like building a five-story house, but the foundation all starts with awareness. um, and so awareness is such a important element. You can't improve or enhance something you're not aware of. Then you move into clarity. Now that you're looking out, do you have clarity on, we talked about it, the why? Do you know why you're doing what you're doing? Do you know what that looks like? Can you define it? then moves into milestones and goals. Remember, more is not a strategy. So when you have the awareness to build the clarity and then put milestones and goals around that, that's what sets you up on a pathway to success. Then the last two elements are more the maintenance around that. One being thought partnerships, whether it's a coach, advisor, mentor, but who is it that is in your life and in your circle that's stretching your thinking, that's broadening your perspectives, that may be challenging some of your own status quos. And then lastly, and a very important one, accountability. Who are you showing your report card to? Because if the only person that's holding you accountable is that voice inside your head that you're making promises to, I can guarantee you, you will not meet those goals. So, all in all, it's those key areas that I've seen. If you can keep those boxes checked, the probability of success, it's not an if, but just a when. But these can also creep up into weaknesses that can derail any growth journey.
So, how are you seeing that? What is the biggest mistake that you're seeing that executives or emerging leaders are making right now?
Yeah, I think it's, when I think about this in terms of an equation, it's there's a success plus experience can equal a downside. And so when I see emerging leaders, again, I was there, I was in these shoes. I know exactly what this feels like. A lot of us, that's what we're chasing. We're chasing some success, we're chasing experience in a particular area or domain. But when those two things become unchecked, it can lead to inflated egos, complacency, and a feeling that you kind of got everything figured out. You've had a little bit of success under your belt and I'm good. I don't need to keep focusing on continuous improvement. I don't need to keep being in a learning mode. I don't need to keep doing those things that I was doing to kind of get me here. So you start taking some, without you even realizing it, a little bit of a shortcut here and there, whether it's in your effort or your preparation or your ability to learn, and cracks in the foundation start to show up. So I would say that's kind of the trap that I see so probably most frequently is what happens and what can happen from a negative standpoint on the other side of success and experience is challenging to kind of keep keep focused.
Let's talk about just when things don't work right, when you have a failure or you have a situation where it didn't turn out like you thought it was at work or even in your growing in your career. How do you coach your clients to manage self through obstacles of failure?
Yeah, I would like to even take a step even further in front of that. And first and foremost is really changing our entire relationship and perspective around failure. And I think part of one of the bullet points that sits underneath what we just talked about before is kind of the downside that you see with success and experience is all of a sudden you start having a different relationship with failure. It becomes this fire that you don't want to touch out of fear of getting burned. You've got more eyes on you. All of a sudden, your appetite for risk starts to lower, and so you want to start playing it safe. It's natural as people progress their career. It's just I'm going to take the safer route. I'm not in a position to go out there and fail, and so we get conservative by default. And so what I like to do is to start before that. Let's change our relationship. Failure doesn't have to be this big, scary monster that we avoid at all cost. I like to convert the thinking into failure is an extremely valuable teacher. There's such a learning mechanism built into failure that if we are a great student and can learn from that and recalibrate our approach, it ultimately makes us better. There's so much wisdom and knowledge and insight to be mined from failure. And then I think when it happens, yeah, I think it's being able to set up a systemized checklist. It's like it doesn't have to mean the sky is falling or the world's ending. Is what should have what should we have known that we didn't know that maybe caused this failure? What would we have done differently with hindsight that would have prevented this failure? And now that we have these learnings, we have this wisdom, we have this experience, what specifically will we do different going forward on the other side of this failure? And so, all of that being said, is failure shouldn't be this negative thing that's avoided at all cost. Failure should be treated as a learning tool. It only helps us accelerate the learning curve, um, if we treat it appropriately. Now, that's not saying you need to go out there and try to fail by any means. You always want to make sure you're protected and hedged on the downside, but failure is inevitable if you're doing anything that's worthy or there's a growth element to it. Um, yeah, learn fast, apply the changes, and keep taking action. Don't let failure scare you out of the game. Don't don't let failure prevent or create inaction going forward. Stay consistent, stay learning, and apply the learnings.
I think that's really powerful. I think, there used to be a mindset of, oh, we can't make a mistake. It's got to be perfect. And now it's like, if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning, you're not growing. And I like how you talked about having a kind of a post kind of like, okay, this happened. Why did this happen? Let's learn from it. And I was just talking to a friend this morning whose son in law just lost his job. And I said, man, this is the best thing could have happened because now he's going to get even a better job. He's probably going to he would have probably just stayed where he was and not grown. And it's kind of like sharing the stories of both of us leaving corporate and starting our own businesses. There's risk there. You never know what's going to happen, but there's something inside that's burning deeper of a purpose. And I want to talk about that last because I think that's what really keeps us all when it's the hard days. You've got a purpose, you know what you're striving for, and it doesn't matter what's happening because you're living for something bigger than yourself. So you had to step down, move your family across the country, start a new business. How did you manage all that? What are some of the things you put in place to help yourself be set up for success, even though that there would be some failures, there would be some lessons learned along the way? What was the kind of mindset you put in place for yourself?
Yeah, I'll kind of go back and on something that I said earlier, I'll kind of go and just put an extra little exclamation point on, and that is when your why is strong enough, you'll always figure out the how. And to give your audience a little something they can kind of take with them, here's a tool that I have, especially at the clarity stage, that I put every single one of my executive leaders through. And the findings are always, when I talk about, it's easy to throw out these big words, but transformative insights and things like that, these are the type of tools that can really help bring them out. And it's just a quick and easy three check system, just three simple questions to kind of ask yourself. And the only thing you have to do is be brutally honest with yourself. The first question is, how am I defining success for me? Not what's expected of me from my environment or my social circles or how I think it's going to look on LinkedIn or nothing like that. How are you internally defining success for yourself? Number two, what does happiness look like for you? Be very honest about that. Create that image. What does that ideal state look like? What are you striving for? What are you optimizing for to get to? And then the third question that brings it all together is, based on the responses of those first two, are the answers to those questions in alignment with one another, or do they conflict with one another? And you would be shocked on the percentage of people, when they go through this for the first time, find major conflicts between those two definitions. So the question that we all have to ask ourselves is, can I achieve my definition of happiness and success at the same time? Because the ugly secret is, for all those people who are sacrificing so much on one side of that equation to chase success, only to think that once I have the title, once I have the promotion, once I have the money, then that will make me happy. Spoiler alert, It rarely, rarely works that way. It's usually you achieve that whatever it is you're chasing that's on the success side, and you've got a lot of guilt. You've given up too much. The bill is now coming due for all that you sacrificed and gave up. And you look back and say, "Hmm, that wasn't worth it. I may have been chasing the wrong goal. I didn't have the clarity around what I was chasing and why I was chasing it. And I'll never get that time back." So that clarity tool is a centering mechanism to always make sure as those definitions evolve, what you think about how you define success and happiness, and make sure that you can create some alignment and harmony there, but also ensure that they're not completely in conflict with each other.
How would you describe one of your clients? Would you have a story you could share with the audience of someone that went through that transformation and um, what it was kind of a light bulb moment for them or a light bulb moment for you as you watch them transform and see this?
Oh yeah, yeah. A great example is I had a client that was an executive in the insurance space, and outcomes are very measurable in insurance, right? It's there's a lot of rankings, there's a lot of comparisons. You can see where you rank on a national level within these different organizations, and he too left the corporate world. This was his version of an entrepreneurial venture, and he was crushing it, doing very well, but wanted to keep getting better. So as we worked through this, we kind of thought about, well, what does success look like? You already have found success, but you're chasing something. Let's define that. And it was just right off the tip of his tongue. He knew exactly what it was. I want to be in the top 2% nationally. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that's a great goal. You want to get above that benchmark, but let's go to the other side. How are you defining happiness? And let's see if we can connect the two. It's like, oh, well, once I get there, this is what the average agency in the top 2%, or the people who own an accumulation of agencies. And it was, yeah, it was he would be able to afford a bigger team and better tools, and ultimately to get to his definition of happiness, that was I could go hands off at that point in time. I said, okay, but the fact of the matter is, to be in the top 2% of anything, you have to be willing to do what the other 98% is not willing to do. So, what does a day in the life of a current top 2%er look like? And I could start to see the light bulb moment start to kind of go off as we talked about. They're probably working 6 days a week. They got a team of 40 people to manage. There's beyond sales um, frustrations. They've got people and they got all kinds of things to worry about. And then it hit him that how he was defining happiness, his definition of success to get it, was going to equate to him giving it all up to get there. And there was no guarantee that he would find it once he got there. So we completely recalibrated his growth strategy that way. There was much, I wouldn't say balance, but there was much more integration with how he was seeking happiness with how it fit into his journey towards achieving success. And I think that's just a prime example of how we lose sight of things that once I get this is when this will happen for me. Only that strategy is always proven to be elusive. And that's what creates so many empty, unhappy multimillionaires, is because everybody thinks that once the money, once the title, once the promotion happens, then I'll be happy. It just doesn't happen like that.
That's a great story. And I think it's great because it was kind of opposite of what he thought it was going to be when he started working on it, right? He had to totally revamp. And sometimes it goes back to the mindset. What was his mindset about it? And I think that was a good example of that. As we get ready to kind of wind down a little bit, Aaron, anything on your mind that you're thinking about as we think about this audience of emerging leaders and executives, entrepreneurs, founders? Anything else that we didn't get to talk about today that you think would be beneficial for them that's coming up for you?
Yeah, not as much that is coming up for me, but I think one of the things that warrants I think this great conversation, would really kind of help just sit on top of, is just kind of sharing one more kind of anecdote of what I refer to as the 3 out success formula. This is a new program that I'm I'm kind of giving to my clients. And it's really something that I founded on back on that examination. What separates people who plateau out versus the ones that continue to find new levels of success? Another golden thread, so to speak, was is maybe it's because I'm just not all that intelligent of a person. So I'm looking for little hacks or little formulas here. And I stumbled across the 3 out success formula. And this reads as, for the people that continue to out prepare, out leverage, and out learn either everyone around them or their former selves, I've never seen an example where they haven't found new levels of success. And every person that I've watched, even from being an intern, that could just continue to elevate their game, these were always across the board the 3 things that all of them did. They did their homework. You never caught them unprepared. They were always prepared. They did their due diligence. They always were able to get more out of their 24 hours than everybody else. They created more leverage on their time, attention, and focus. And then no matter the wealth, no matter the status, no matter the title, they were always there to learn. Even from people well below them in junior level positions, they always showed up thinking about, how can I learn something here? And I think if you can do those 3 things, I guess I would challenge your audience to think, have you ever seen someone who does those 3 things consistently and not found next level success? I've yet to be able to find one.
Those are great. A great way to end. I love the 3 out success: out prepare, out leverage, out learn, and outperform yourself. I think as an entrepreneur, it's like, yep, got to do those.
I force myself to check those 3 boxes every day.
Yeah. And then you know that you've done your best and it's kind of reminds me of getting into the proximity of people that can help you get to that next level if you're not in the proximity. Who are you hanging out with? Who, like, we talked about that earlier in the call today, but it's really about how do you out prepare? Well, who are you hanging out with? And how do you out leverage? Well, who are you learning from? And how do you out learn? What are you learning? Is there something new and different? Are you going after the shiny object? Are you doing one of those? There's so many classes, so many things out there. Are you just doing that for entertainment?
I tell my clients all the time, especially on the out learning piece, is showing up and thinking you're the smartest person in the room has a terrible ROI. There's a there is zero upside and massive downside. Instead, stay in learning mode. Ask questions. Go 5 layers deep of asking why something's happening the way it's happening. Stay in learning mode. So if there was one that I would prioritize over those 3, that's the one that is always the first sign of a growth leader starting to turn into um, a leader that's no longer growing.
Mm, such a great point. I love the fact that you built your business around who you once were and what you needed. And now you're in this trajectory of a growth mindset in a performance
That's
mindset
right.
kind of way. How do we go from, I think Carol Dweck wrote her book, what, in the 80s or something, 90s? It was still kind of just stays out there. And I think it's powerful because it's thinking about what we're saying and how we're saying it and how we're talking to ourselves. So I really appreciate the work you shared today and the tools. How can people get a hold of you, Aaron, if they're interested in learning more about you and in your business?
Yeah, 2 ways. If you're just looking for more information, wanting to find out more about me, services I provide, mythology, feel free to go to my website, performancemindsetcoaching.co. And if you're looking for a next level engagement, I encourage everyone to follow and let's connect on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there. I'm sharing leadership thoughts almost on a daily basis. And so I try to provide as much value through that channel as I possibly can to just help all leaders, whether you have any interest in engaging with me or not. There's always going to be something to be learned from something I'm regurgitating through that platform.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Aaron. I'm so excited about what you're doing in your life and how you're making a difference and how you're making impact. So can't wait to talk a year or two from now and see what's happening.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
You have been listening to Dominate Your Day podcast. If you're ready to transform your life and workplace from the inside out, go to danawilliamsco.com and set up a discovery call. We would love to connect with you and equip you with some helpful resources. Thank you for listening today, and please take a moment to subscribe to Dominate Your Day wherever you listen.